I really need to buy a ring light because I can't find a place in my house where I don't look orange. And I don't think I do right now, but once I do this or this, I think I do. Right now, I wish this had alcohol in it. Hey Booktube, it's Kim at Middle of the Book March. There is part of a smile. Yeah. What is it? This is my Bookish week for Saturday, January 28th. Yes, I think I got it. Next week is Friday, and we're going to be starting on our next read for February, which is Mama Day by Gloria Naylor. So let me show you what I finished. I do have some other things to talk to you about. We did, in fact, finish A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. And orange? I think it's better this way. Is this better? Okay. Well, I got to get a ring light. I got to get my hands on a ring light. So, A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. This is our first Blind Eye Book Club novel because I've had this on my shelf. Maybe not this particular copy, but it's been years. And I think this book was published in 2013. Am I right? Yeah, 2013. So this is the story, excuse me, this is the two different perspectives. Ruth, the writer within the story, and now N-A-O, a teenage Japanese girl living in Japan. And Ruth, the writer, Ruth Ozeki, has written a character whose name is Ruth and whose husband is Oliver, as is Ruth Ozeki's real-life husband. And they live on the west coast of Canada and the Pacific Northwest, which is also true for Ruth Ozeki in real life. The book does have a Buddhist nun character, and Ruth Ozeki herself is a Buddhist priest, Zen Buddhist priest. So there's a lot of similarities going on. There's a lot of things, a lot of connections. And that makes this novel very meta, if that's the cliche way to say it. But this is almost an I novel. Basically, that it's an autobiographical novel. And the whole time I was reading it, with Ruth, the character of the writer, and Ruth, the author, I kept wondering which parts of this are autobiographical and how much is it in? And do all of these things apply to Ruth Ozeki's real life? So the story is based on Ruth, the writer in the story, finding a package that's washed up on her beach, her local beach. She and her husband live on an island. And it's a package that's a large baggie wrapped up in another large baggie, and so on and so on. And what she finds inside is a beat-up journal with some letters, which turn out to be the journal of now a teenager in Japan. Ruth and her husband Oliver assume that this is due to the tsunami and that there's a lot of ocean garbage and ocean detritus that has washed up people's possessions, people's belongings, and it's just slowly starting to make its way over to Western Canada and the US. And so she becomes consumed with reading about this teenager and is suffering from writer's block. She's trying to finish her memoir. Her mother, who had dementia, had recently passed away. So she has a lot going on in her life. And her husband, Oliver, has a chronic illness and is kind of an environmentalist / artist. So there's a lot. Their lives are full. But Ruth becomes concerned with this teenage girl's journal that has washed up on the beach. And as she starts to read it, she starts to get to know now. She starts to almost sink into Now's story. And as the readers are reading, we first get to know Now as what we believe is going to be kind of a superficial 16-year-old teenage girl writing with purple ink and big loopy letters. And we think it's going to be a silly teenager's diary. But as we continue to read, this book is much darker, far darker than it seems to be as you begin. And the way the book is set up is it alternates between Ruth's perspective and Now's story. And it goes back and forth in time, but does it really? Because as the more Ruth reads, the more she feels that she wants to support Now. She wants to be there for this teenager. And I'm not going to tell you why, but Ruth is kind of almost feeling like she's crossing space and time, even though the subject of the journal at the time she wrote it was a 16-year-old girl, but at this point, when it's washed up on Ruth's beach and Ruth is reading it, she could be dead. She could be living very close to Ruth. She could be in her late 20s. She could be a little older. We don't know. But Ruth becomes so absorbed in Now's writing that she thinks she knows her and she wants to help her. So it's really interesting. There's two things, actually there's three things in this book that I normally really dislike in novels: footnotes, second person perspective, and a teenage narrator. However, aside from the footnotes, I got over myself as I read the novel and I really enjoyed it. The footnotes were a distraction for me. They didn't offer me any more understanding to the novel. The footnotes are mostly for Japanese terms or some words written out in Japanese language that I wouldn't have known what they were, but it's very easy to understand the meaning through the context of the story. So for me, they were a distraction. There was a little bit of history that Ozeki actually put into some footnotes, also was not necessary for me. So they were bothersome. I don't like footnotes in novels. I honestly don't want to have to go up and down in my eyesight, in my visuals as I'm reading a novel and read footnotes. It pulls me out of the story too often. So that was a little irritating. The second person perspective, at first I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to like this, because Now's journal is written as if she's writing it to somebody, as if she's talking to somebody. She refers to you, and if you're reading this, if you're out there. But eventually her journal changes, and the language changes, and Now is simply writing a story. She's writing her life and the events and the situations in her life. I do have to say, the darkness in the book, there are some pretty strong trigger warnings for suicide, for bullying and assault and abuse in schools, for mental health, for depression. There's a lot in here that I wasn't expecting, but Ozeki writes extremely smoothly. I really did enjoy reading the book, mostly for her writing, and I really enjoyed reading Now's journal and her story. The character of Ruth is not a very strong character who pulls you into her perspective and pulls you into her story. She's not that interesting, and Now is a much stronger character who comes from a much more interesting and fascinating place than does Ruth, the writer, in the novel. So at the end, I started to realize I'm reading a book written by an author named Ruth, who's married to a man named Oliver, who's Japanese Canadian, and she's writing about a writer named Ruth, who's married to a man named Oliver, who's also Ruth, the writer in the story, is Japanese Canadian. It started to get like it almost had a telescope effect on me, and it's not bad, but it started to open up my brain a little bit with the concept of time and what exactly is meant by the term time being or for the time being. So that was a very interesting connection to make. This book did not blow me away, but I definitely am really glad I read it. I really did enjoy it. I would recommend it because there are a lot of people out there that are going to love this book or who have already read it and loved it. So it's definitely worth the read, and I will absolutely pick up another Ruth Ozeki novel. I have several on my shelf. So that is that. The second book I finished is Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro, and this is translated from the Spanish by Frances Riddle. This is a short novel that is written from the perspective of Elena, or Elena, however you pronounce that or want to pronounce it, who is an elderly woman. Actually, she's not even that old. She's probably in her 60s. and has advanced Parkinson's disease. We learned that very early on. And she calls it a horror. She refers to her disease that way because it's basically taken her life away. And we learn early on that her adult daughter Rita has died in what the police have deemed a suicide. But Elena is convinced it's not a suicide. She would never have done that. It's a murder, and I'm going to find out who did it. And she's trying to get across town. Well, for a woman with advanced Parkinson's, it's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to navigate getting from one side of the city to the other. From getting on a bus, to buying bus tickets, to getting in a cab, getting out of a cab, paying for things, being able to communicate with people. She can't lift her head any higher than her eyes directed towards the ground. So people don't know how to take her. And she finds it very difficult to communicate effectively so people understand what she's saying. Because of Parkinson's, her words are slurring. She drools. And so it's so difficult for her to function and to move and to speak and to be part of the community. But she is convinced that her daughter did not kill herself. She was found hanging in a church. And Elena continues to assert that her daughter would never have walked into the church because the night she died, it was raining. And her daughter was very superstitious and would never have gone near a church in the rain. So that is the one major point that Elena has staked everything on. And that's why she knows her daughter was murdered versus having killed herself. This is a fantastic book. It's so incredibly written. It's so creative. There's so much to think about. Just imagining this woman's journey in a single day from one side of a city to another, because she is on a mission and she is out to speak to a specific person. And we have no idea what's going to happen, really who that person is, until we get to the very end of the book. There's so many revelations. There are snippets and snapshots of the past, of her interactions with her daughter Rita and the conversations they had. There are snippets of conversations about Elena's disease of Parkinson's and her medical doctors and some of the conversations with them. It's illuminating. And the writing is so fantastic. It is descriptive and propulsive. You want to find out. I wanted to find out more about Elena's disease. I wanted to find out how that affected the relationship with her daughter. I wanted to find out how that's affecting her body and how she is dealing with it. What about the medications? And does she have recourse? What is she going to do? And this is a very short novel to do that to my brain, to really want to sink into it. It's a fantastic book. Excellent, excellent translated fiction. Highly recommend this. And again, another one. I was so happy that I decided to pick this one up. It's more of a newer acquisition for me, but it's an excellent book. Highly recommend. So, what am I currently reading? I'm currently reading Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer. This sucker is a debut novel from a 26-year-old, or she was 26 when it was published. It's freaking incredible as a debut novel, and I haven't even read that much. I'm blown away so far. I don't know if it'll be a 5-star book for me, but damn, that is good. What else? I am listening to a memoir, Fire Shut Up in My Bones by Charles M. Blow. As far as I understand, he is a journalist, and this is his memoir of growing up as a poor young black boy in Louisiana. I believe it's Louisiana. The abuse, the trauma, the neglect, the poverty that he experienced in his childhood, but also the family members that got him through to the point where he not only survived, but he made a life for himself. I am reading on my Kindle Native Speaker by Chang Rae Lee. This was published a while ago. I think it was published in 1999, if I'm not mistaken. He's a Korean-American author, and I just started that one. That's very good as well. The writing is excellent. And what else? Those are the 3 that I'm currently reading. By the time you see this, I may have already started Good Behavior by Molly Keene. Britta and I are reading this for our Irish Women readathon. We don't really have a schedule. We don't have a deadline. We just have a list of novels written by Irish women. And this is the one we picked for February, and I'm really looking forward to this. Don't know much about it yet, but I've heard excellent things about Molly Keane. So yeah, liking that one. Really quick, 2 more things to talk to you about. I think this is getting a little long. I acquired some books. I acquired a book. 2 books. And it's interesting. These are used, and I love buying used books. But I found these, to me, these are jackpots. They're used and they're a little tiny beat up, or at least one, a little tiny beat up, but that's fine. I found this copy of The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas in the yellow trimmed Penguin. Now, this, I don't know when this copy was published. It's a former library book. I don't know. But I love Penguin Classics with the old ones with the yellow trim. I don't know why, but certain penguins I love, certain I don't. I love the green penguins. I like the old ones with orange. I think I have one over there, but some of those are mass market size, which is the smaller paperbacks. But I found this used copy and I grabbed it. And the Piece de Resistance, Middlemarch by George Eliot, I found in the yellow trim, and it's in just spectacular shape. Obviously, it's an older book, but dang, it's in great shape, and I grabbed it. I love the yellow trim. It matches my copy of Daniel Deronda in the yellow trim Penguin. I am so happy. I am so happy that these can nestle together and enjoy each other's company. Now, it's funny because the Penguin Classics come in all different colors and versions, and I'm pretty sure there's a reason for the different colors. I think Jack from Rambling Raconteur may have talked about this at one point, and I will have a link to his channel below. There is a rhyme. There's a rhyme and a reason for the different colors, and I think it may have to do with the era or the part of the world that they were from. I don't know. But it's funny because I have several other Penguin Classics that are newer versions, and it's the black. It's the kind of the plain black with no colored trim. This is Henry James' Portrait of the Lady. And I don't love these as much as I do these. And another thing, they're not as floppy. They still are, but they're not as floppy and fun to open as the older ones. And of course, the older ones have been read and opened and cracked and whatever and all that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You get my drift. But I just thought that was a fun idiosyncrasy of mine that I thought I'd talk to you about. If you like Penguin Classics, I love them, love them. They're actually extremely good contextually as well, with notes and appendices and all of it. They're excellent. So if you have like different things that are quirky or weird, and if you like Penguin Classics, let me know in the comments below. Here's the last thing I want to talk to you about. I don't know if I just moved my tripod, but I was trolled over in the past week, and it pissed me off a little bit, and I'm going to tell you why. I got a Voxer message, which made me like, why Voxer? But I got a Voxer message from the avatar was some dude's face, and it was a man's name. I didn't know who this was. And was a text Voxer message. Had it been an audio, I never would have opened it. But it was a text message, and all it said was, "Hello, beautiful. How are you today?" Okay, so many problems with that. Alarm bells going off in my head. First of all, you don't know me. So if any men out there are listening or watching me right now, don't ever address a woman that way who you don't know well enough to know that she will find that A, either flattering, or B, funny, or C, familiar. If this was an actual guy reaching out to send me a message by saying, "Hello, beautiful, how are you today?" It's so disrespectful and insulting to me as a woman to address me that way. I'm not somebody who you can look at to approve of or not, or think of beautiful or not. You don't know me. people in my real life who do know me, we banter. I receive compliments and love them. I give compliments. We make fun of each other. We tease. We do all of that. But for a perfect stranger, if in fact this was a real person, completely inappropriate. And could it be a troll? Could it be a robotic internet troll that sends out these messages? Possibly. I don't know. But I've also heard friends of mine who have received messages similar, whether not necessarily on Voxer. They've received messages in their Facebook Messenger, on Twitter, on whatever other platform. And a few other friends have actually responded and engaged with the message sender. And then they finally realize after a long chain of messages, by the way, where do I know you from? Or by the way, are you a friend of mine or a friend of a friend? And it either turned out badly by being, textually abused in a message chain, or this person just dropped off. Well, in the time that you were messaging this total stranger, they could have been collecting any amount of data from your computer or your system. And when I got that message, I immediately deleted it and never responded and immediately deleted it. I just felt like it's so inappropriate, so insulting to address somebody that way who you don't know, and stop, just make it stop. I am always amazed at the amount of troll messages I get, and I've seen other booktubers get, that YouTube doesn't stop, and that YouTube either can't or won't stop. So it's always shocking to me when that happens. And this wasn't on YouTube, but I've received them there as well. So when I first started on BookTube, so many of my initial comments were for porn sites or sexually explicit messages. I have received so many friend requests with a picture of a extremely scantily clad young woman, very busty, very cleavage-bearing pictures, and wanting to be my friend on Instagram, on Facebook, any number of places, or even on messaging me on YouTube. And for the life of me, I can't understand why, the conglomerates of Google and YouTube and Facebook and all those places, Meta, whatever you want to call yourself, can't make this stop. So that's my soapbox for today. If you've experienced that, believe me, and this was pretty tame. This was very tame. I know of people who have received far more abusive statements or messages than this. But that's it for me for today. I've rambled on long enough. Let me know in the comments below if you have anything to say. If you have any comments or responses, let me know about the books you're reading. Let me know if you like Penguin Classics. And that's it for me. I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.